lot of people, well, it comes back to awareness. What are you aware of? Are you even aware of what's outside your window? Are you aware of your role in creating and establishing things you call problems? Will you take responsibility? And what will you do with that responsibility?
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Lincoln Stoller, a therapist, physicist, and lifelong explorer who's going to challenge everything you think you know about success, awareness, and why the most valuable things in your life might already be right in front of you. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. What if the thing you've been searching for isn't somewhere ahead of you, but right where you're standing and you just can't see it yet? Most of us have been trained to measure money, followers, titles, likes, outcomes, but nobody taught us to be aware of what we're actually building, aware of the role we play in the problems we keep complaining about, aware of the value that's already at our feet while we keep reaching for the next milestone. Our guest today spent decades inside a physics lab, software business, mountain ranges, jungles, and therapy rooms. And what he found in all those wildly different places was the same quiet crisis. People who are successful by every measure and still somehow missing it. If you've ever hit a goal and felt nothing, this conversation's going to sit with you. Let's meet Lincoln Stoller and see how it's done. Welcome to Richer Soul, Lincoln Stoller. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky. Let's have a brawl here.
And I'm excited for that. I always love a good heated discussion. Before we get there, let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I'm getting used to this question. My family was a combination of artists and techno people. My father was an architectural photographer, which is technical. My mother was a painter. I don't know, my grandparents, they were like immigrants. But my mother was sort of absent, in her paintings, and my father was sort of absent in his work. And I was sort of alone because my siblings were 10 years older. So I mistakenly put effort and emphasis on my teachers, but they didn't care because they were just teachers. So I got frustrated. And I would say the answer sort of to your money question is that I didn't have a lot of experience with money. My father made a lot of it, or relatively enough, so that I didn't need to worry. And at first, I didn't feel any limitations. I mean, I wasn't going very far, so I was 8 years old. And it wasn't until I was 13 that I started mountain climbing that I needed more money and took more risks and traveled further and had to manage my own finances. And I would still say money was never a scarce resource. I had to manage it, but I didn't have to earn it. That's actually a big answer to your question because it shaped my attitudes around it. I saw money as a resource, not particularly scarce one. I didn't waste it, And then I was doing a lot of traveling because of that sport I was doing. And then I became a physics student, went to college and went to graduate school. And, the wise thing to do was to buy a house. You don't want to pay rent. So I ended up buying a house, a crappy little house, one of those old Texas houses that's made of sort of sheetrock and plywood. And I actually paid $40,000 for a house. And then started a family, moved to New York, bought another house, built a house. And so I've always been involved in money as a resource, but not a scarce one. So now I am a professional therapist and I deal with the sane and the insane. They're not as extreme as you think. There are a lot of people on the spectrum in between. And the sane would like you to think they're sane. And sometimes the insane are quite attached to their label. And sort of my job is to get them off that label because it's not a very helpful label. Neither of them are. But that's, I guess, my relationship to money. I don't make a lot. I make relatively little. And I think it's because sort of my whole background has been performance based. I don't care about reward as much as I care about achievement. So this is why my work in therapy, I want to see what I can do rather than see what I can earn. I'm more of an explorer, which means I'm willing to take risks, and the rewards are not financial primarily for me. They are insight and understanding, which is why I do physics too, and also get a lot of shit in that area. But of course, I'm not employed as physics is a very closed field, very select and aloof and exclusive and full of nonsense. So it doesn't live up its reputation of being insightful. So that's, I mix these two worlds of technical insight, of which I find little, and personal insight, which I find much more flexible and chaotic and, well, spiritual. It does. I mean, you don't know what the definition of spiritual is, really. Everyone's different. But in terms of your question of when did I learn about money, I don't care about money. I guess you'd have to say I care about spirit. This is what mountaineering taught me. Always looking at death. Death was always their companion in a high risk sport. And it's not a bad companion as long as you keep it at a distance, keeps you in perspective. Very important to have perspective. So, my answer to your question is I don't care about quantity of money. I care about quality of value, right? So, hell with money, all about value. Next question.
What's the line between sane and insane?
Great question. I think it's your ability to communicate. If you can communicate your insanity, people don't think you're crazy unless you say, I want to cut your head off. But if you can communicate what you're thinking and seeing, you sound much more sane than if you obviously were delusional. So, in a sense, that's, when you lose it, can't communicate, you can't see reality that other people see, then people call you insane. And it's a label. You rarely agree with it. This is what I see. You don't have to see bats and elephants. You can see people out to get you. And I don't know what, the comedian said, just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean people are not out to get you. And my experience has been in physics and in psychology, but also in business. So I spent 20 years as a computer entrepreneur. And in business, everybody's a little out to get you. It's not entirely collegial. It's often competitive and it's financially competitive. So the spectrum of sanity has to have at least three settings: the sane, whatever that is, the insane, which is sort of like unable to communicate, and the adversarial. When you're in an adversarial business relationship, sanity and insane is not the primary problem. It's survival and optimization. But I would say that I did meet in business people who I think are not as well balanced as they should be. They're not as spiritual as they should be, because that's my take here, is what one should be, as in responsible and aware. So what was your question? Oh, the difference between sanity and insanity. Yeah, it's a little vague.
Interesting. You have three very different domains there.
Yes,
You have a domain of physics, science based.
yes.
You have a domain of entrepreneurship. And then you have this other domain, which is much more in the spiritual therapy type of space.
Let's add a fourth, family.
Okay.
Four.
Okay.
Family is sort of different, right?
Yes.
Legacy, lineage, genetics, culture.
Yes, but that's one that I think people would assume could fit with any and all of those, right? It's not like a
Distinct, right?
distinct type of thing. It's yes, I can have a family and be entrepreneurial, but it's different to have those other three domains in the same person.
Okay.
What brought you to explore all of those and to do all of those different things? Because
Curiosity. I mean, I don't think a human should limit themselves to one or the other of those three or four. I think you have to, yeah, and here we get a kind of thin ice. I think to be fully human, you have to experience widely. This is partly a result of my traveling. You got to I lived in the Caribbean in a very community oriented village. I lived in the jungle in a very subsistence oriented village. I lived in Manhattan in a, well, that's kind of crazy. And you get to conclude that there's no one way. Also, I should also add, I spent some time in Mongolia, which was useful because it's a very old culture. I was shocked in Mongolia. I'd never been in a culture that had been unchanged for 600 years. I mean, look, America, Canada, Western Europe, but Mongolia, people still have pictures of Genghis Khan on their wall. Like in the US, they have pictures of JFK. So you have to start to wonder what's the similarities and what are the differences? And then the other dimension is like rational and emotional, the science and the business and the psychotherapy. And if you're a curious person and if you're creative, it's like, are you going to limit yourself to a certain style? I'm not a fiction writer, and I don't know if I could be. I think I tried once. I didn't really feel comfortable. So I'm not making everything up. I'm mostly, I guess you should say, trying to keep my feet on the ground here, involved with awareness, right? Awareness is a big thing. What am I aware of? What am I integrating? And I can be sort of open to other people's take on things. And one of my personal challenges is where to draw the line, what to put up with, what standards to enforce. I've been married twice. I don't think I enforced my boundaries well enough. And also with my clients, I wonder if I'm being too lenient with them. We're talking about therapy clients. Because I remember one client I had who insisted that he do it his way. And it didn't work. And I didn't think it would work. And I'm not sure whether I should have insisted on doing it my way and having him leave. And in the end, like I say, I was exploring. All right, you have this point of view. And so you work with people who make money to try to give them value in their life. And you might be in a similar position saying, okay, you have accumulated these resources. What do you want to do with them? You don't know, or maybe you think you do know, what value is or should be. And I would say the same when I'm dealing with people. I don't know what their values are. And I'll draw the line at like violence. Okay, violence, I won't go there. But if it's less than violent, maybe you're just confused. Maybe you need to pursue your confusion. Do you need to go buy a sports car? That always seemed like a waste to me, but I'd love to have one, but I wouldn't want to pay for it. So, what do you do? I forgot what was your question, but you asked something after sanity and insanity, and then I forgot.
I'm trying to remember where we went from.
Yeah.
Oh, was that all the different places that
Oh, yeah.
your different zones that you've worked in that are very different? That's not the usual
Yeah.
mix of things.
Well, I say I enforce their similarity and the necessity of being broad.
You made an interesting comment that you've lived in very many different places. As you lived in those places, where is human nature the same and where is it different amongst us?
I guess, as I understand that question, it has to do with how dependent or independent you are. So in the jungle, people were very independent. They had to be. There were no stores anywhere up for anything. They had to build or gather everything or grow. And everybody was capable at a basic level that was not specialized. Everyone could build a house, everyone could make dinner, everyone could grow crops, everyone could hunt, everyone could get along, sort of. And, that's interesting, the level at which they could get along. And then you go to a city and people are specialized. They have an identity, they have a role, they have a schedule, they have a job. They're not very able to fix their plumbing or fix their roof. They accumulate money and they use the money to hire someone else. So in between those two, there's a lot of latitude. And I would say somewhere in there is the answer to the question. People's ability to be dependent or independent defines how comfortable they are going outside their boundaries. And underneath that all, there are many similar questions. So it sort of comes back to family, which you identified as being a broad category that covered many areas, and also childhood, which everyone has and has trauma from. So I've often been amused to get people from foreign cultures and foreign lands talk to me with the same problems everyone else has. You know, father was an alcoholic or mother was an alcoholic, you know, a split family, divorced when they were children, or somebody died. Same stuff. Lack of support, attempts to accumulate resources, wondering where to go. I have a client who's a successful banker. He's trying to raise a family. Okay, different problem. Family, dealing with a new baby in a changing environment and all kinds of stuff. Another client who's an explorer and who always sort of who's like a poet, loves to explore, loves to be in the wilderness, burns out his companions who aren't as in love with the wilderness. And I can relate to that because I was a mountaineer for 10 years of my life and learned a lot about being responsible and death and risks and poetry, you could say, nature. So, again, we've sort of wandered off the topic, but now I'm thinking of the question you asked me for, sanity versus insanity. And I lost, the question you asked most recently.
I just find that across the ages and across cultures, there is so much that is common to the human experience,
Yes.
regardless of what that is. And then there are differences based on the way people live. And it's just interesting to see what they are and also to be aware of other ways of doing things and not just stuck in the way that you see the world, not realizing that there's a whole rotation of views out there and that you can experience it from a variety of different places and views.
So what?
I think a lot of people that I see are extremely stuck in their view and they can't even see another view, which also gets them stuck in life.
Yes.
And they'll just sit there not realizing, oh, I can just do this. Or going back to the money thing, I can't tell you how often I can look at things and go, is there a reason you don't see the diamonds and gold at your feet? They can't see it. The opportunities, the possibilities, the people are very, like, you've had all these different careers, so to speak, or explorations. A lot of people got put on a track and have no idea how to change that track. And they live a life of, dare I say, insanity.
Yeah, I don't think you should say insanity. I think you should leave that to the extreme. I think it's important to recognize there is a stuck area, which is not insanity. Is for my purposes, deals with being destructive or
Right.
being unable to be constructive. But a lot of people who are stuck, they're not destructive, they're not constructive, they're just kind of wasting. And, like you say, and I find it disturbing to reflect on, having diamonds at your feet. I mean, this is an old theme, right? The value of life and the obliviousness to its beauty, or what beauty is even, or what attraction is, or what value is. So, yeah, a lot of people, well, it comes back to awareness, or I come back to awareness. What are you aware of? Are you even aware of what's outside your window? Are you aware of your role in creating and establishing the things you call problems? Will you take responsibility? And what will you do with that responsibility? Part of my history has been to take the foolish approach, which is to try anything and to make anything a goal. And I would say that I've failed more than I succeeded in reaching what my goal was. But along the way, I accumulated a lot of valuable experience. I have a few positive mentors and 100 times as many negative mentors. The negative mentors are still valuable. I think I wanted to write a book one day, and maybe will, on how to learn from bad lessons or how to learn from bad people, because they're just as important as good people, and they're certainly more frequent that you'll encounter them, at least in my definition of what a really good mentor is, of which I've only had a handful. But you get a lot of selfish, self-obsessed, unaware, stuck people. And if you get entangled with, then you become enmeshed in their problems. And that's your fault, in a sense. So now that I'm 70, I have increasingly high threshold of acceptance, which you could basically means I accept no one except my clients. I don't want to talk to you if you don't want to pay me $200 an hour. And, a lot of people I'd kind of like to talk to, but they won't pay me $200 an hour, so I won't talk to them. And I've tried a few times to go out to social events, and it just doesn't happen fast enough for me. Because when you're being paid $200 an hour, you get to the root of things quickly. I like that, right? I mean, you can appreciate that. You don't screw around when you're on the clock. And so that satisfies my sense of progress, and most other things don't. So I sit here and schedule my time to always be productive, writing or reading or being confused or talking to you and other people, putting out radiation to the universe.
Interesting. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit to education. I know you have a lot of thoughts on the topic
Oh, dear.
of how our system works. And maybe you know the outcomes much later in life because of the problems caused. But I'd love to hear your input.
I don't think our system teaches you the right stuff. I think our system, no, I don't even think, I know our system of education was developed to socialize people. I mean, we know that. The history. There didn't used to be, in the 16th century, anything like public school. People learned a craft, they apprenticed, something like that. They didn't have rounded educations. They didn't have a culturally broad experience. In Prussia, in the late 19th century, they invented school in order to basically move people up to the Industrial Revolution. So they knew how to run machines and companies and other things like that. And they needed a certain amount of reading and writing and arithmetic. And it was all about preparing people for the economy. And then it sort of became a little more insidious as behavioral psychology said, well, why not prepare them for voting and behaving in either democratic or undemocratic ways? So that was like put into schooling. So now you've got, and it currently is, although it's different in different countries. So like Finland is famous for its good education, and the US is famous for its mediocre education, public school, but private schools follow the same lines of teaching people what they're supposed to know, as opposed to teaching people what value is, what spirit is, what achievement or capability or sanity or insanity is. And I remember in my high school, there were certain people what do you call them, students, colleagues, people my age, who I thought were successful. And quite a few of them committed suicide since. So they were basically people who met the grade and achieved the goals that were set before them, but didn't find those goals personally satisfying. And it's especially frustrating to be a successful person and feel empty because you've built an identity for yourself that's meaningless in that case. So I think what education has to do, and doesn't for the most part, is teach you how to be fulfilled, whatever that means. And, that gets back to sanity and insanity, independence, entrepreneurship. Some people like to follow rules, other people don't. Some are creative, others are not so creative. And, my mistake as a young person was to look to teachers who are not educators, in my opinion, to guide me. And that wasn't their role, and they weren't interested, and they weren't effective in doing that. And that was frustrating for me. Like I say, my father was away making money. My mother was off on cloud nine making paintings. My siblings were in college, and I was frustrated and continue to be frustrated all the way through graduate school, where the continued fantasy is that we're doing something noble, science and engineering, but it was kind of bullshit. They were actually doing something that made money. And, getting back to your area of profit and value, there was not a great deal of sense of value outside of celebrity in science, and a lot of politics that was hidden. They didn't teach you politics, but they exercised it in, who got the grants.
You made a comment about successful but empty. Do you find a lot of people are successful but empty?
Mm. That's sort of a reflexive question because it depends on who comes to me. I make it clear that I'm spiritually inclined. So the people who are empty, they don't tend to be spiritually inclined. That probably was their problem. They didn't consider spirituality, and I'm using that term broadly. And so they don't consider themselves spiritual. They consider themselves effective or successful financially. celebrated in some regard, powerful. And so the people who come to me tend to be a little more spiritual, or at least looking for it. So I don't see a lot of people who lack a desire to be spiritual. I see people who are unsuccessful, but usually it's on the radar. So I think your question is sort of like, given the population, the bell curve under which, most people sit in the middle, I would say that most of them are not spiritual because they weren't trained to be. It wasn't, especially we're talking Western culture here. If you grew up in an indigenous culture or one of the more theocratic cultures, it would be different. But I didn't grow up in those. And I think about my time in the Caribbean, which was a very community-oriented culture and had a lot of Baptist religion. At least the women did. The men just drank alcohol. The women went to church. And it had the interesting feature that although there was a fair amount of pregnancy out of wedlock, there were no orphans. Everybody was adopted by somebody. So this was the community, a very integral community without structure, not vertical. It was horizontal, all based on lineage and responsibility. And I just think about that because they never made much money and they didn't value money all that much. And when they got a lot of money, they get all fucked up. They'd buy guns and cars and do weird stuff that nobody could relate to and get very dysregulated. So, I think about that. There's a poor culture, which is rich in spirit. And then we've got this Western culture, which is rich in material and poor in spirit. So I guess part of the answer to your question is it depends what culture you're talking about. In one culture, you'd find people richer in one thing, and in another culture, they'd be richer in something else.
It does. Do you have a definition of spirituality or
No,
a feeling of what it means to you?
Yeah, it's kind of creative wonder and potential, transhuman, transpersonal, beyond the material, value and feeling connected. Those are the things that make spirituality to me. And, for some people, it's connected to some higher power, or it could be connected to a broader social responsibility, it could be connected to your family. Or if you had money, it might be connected to philanthropy. It's possible. I don't think that's a very easy one, but, could be. And yeah, so like now I'm living in Canada, having moved from New York, Texas to Massachusetts, California. Now I moved to Canada and I'm noticing, oh God, you notice lots of differences in culture. There's a lot of Christianity here, a lot of churches, they're all over the place. And there's a lot of communalism. Canada's sort of reputed to be more socialized. And you see it in the community attitudes of people. I don't know how deep it is, but it's, you see the structure there. You see the churches, you see the gatherings. It doesn't meet my criteria for spirituality, but it's moving in that direction. So I think there are steps. If you were to take your question and take it apart, I would say, rather than ask what spiritual means, one should ask, how do you get from here to there? So yeah, spirituality might be some great sense of purpose and connection to the divine, whatever that means. And most of us are living a life of stability or looking for stability and resources, security. And how do you get from one to the other? And are they on the same spectrum? Because I sort of think they're not. I think spirituality requires you to be immaterial or to have value in what is not material. And so you have to kind of make a jump or build a bridge between security and inspiration. Yeah, I think there are different bridges, could be creative and it could be insane. So you got to watch out about that. It's interesting to read the stories of serial killers who all, because they're psychopaths, sound very sane. They sound sane. Psychopathy is defined by having a very rigid logical structure. Just happens that you want to kill people. And, so reading those people, they make perfect sense. You just fill in the blank. Where one person would say profit and success, they say murder and, homicide. And otherwise it makes sense. So you got to watch out about not just how you build your world, but what the steps you are, your goals. And so I'd say, to try to answer the question of spirituality, it seems to me to involve service and responsibility to a higher level than just your own, a social, human, global, community, family. I think that's got to play a part in spirituality. It can't just be, get down on your knees and pray to Jesus. That's like empty if it causes no one any benefit. What do you think?
Well, the latter is more religion.
Yeah.
And I think it's not that religion is bad or good. I think what's happened is most people who were religious didn't pick their religion. They were handed it by their parents. I don't know how many have actually read the religious texts. And even if they've read them cover to cover, how much they understand what's written there. And so if I go through and I read the Bible at a deeper level, it's extremely spiritual. And I think there are parts of it that are extremely energetic in the sense that when Jesus healed people, he's like, you're healed by your faith, right? You're healed by your power. And that there's certain things in there. Now, maybe they're stories. I don't know. I wasn't there. But when you start to read between the lines and see the words, and again, the problem with the words is that I'm reading it in English, not Aramaic. So it's been translated a few times, and it's been the culture that it was written to is not the culture I live in. So I may not understand a lot of the little nuances that are there. And so it takes a tremendous effort to truly understand. But, and I would say this, I think, of every religious text, regardless of the religion. I think many of them have the same issues or the same way that they get approached by people. But there is a spiritual side. And that's why I always am interested in the physics, because all of a sudden physicists are like, oh, wait a minute, there's a whole spiritual thing going on here that we refuse to look at for so long that maybe we need to start looking at. And so I think when people open up their view, they start to see things a little wider. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, well, that's always good to consider. But I would say that physics, I don't see any, I've never understood the spirituality of physicists. And I would say that it, in my view, should be replaced with the notion of creativity. You can't add spirituality to physics and get a result, but you can add creativity to get a result. It may be wrong or maybe nonsense, but it's a result. So you can, you can mix things up, but in any formal discipline. So a better example might be literature. You can add spirituality to literature, which is more than being just creative. You have to have a poetic ability to see beauty and in language and visions. It would be very hard to do that in the context of physics. But you can be creative and you can be enraptured, sort of. You can wonder about things. You won't be well received, but you can do it. And I think coming back to my vision of what you're doing, trying to add value to profit, and I keep coming back to being creative. And the people I know who were successful as engineers, I mean, like Thomas Edison, he said, I failed my way to success and is credited with inventing the light bulb. I mean, why did he do that? Was it just curiosity? Or was it spiritual? And I think that's an interesting question because I think it, in a sense, had to be kind of spiritual. How can you fail 1,000 times and still feel motivated to continue when you know that you're going to fail another 999 times? I mean, it's got to be something more than just being productive. Well, like painting or like literature. Most of it you create is garbage. I write a lot. You got to edit a lot. In a business, you don't quite have that latitude where you can just throw out stuff and start over again without losing what you've built. But you can do that, and it's a difference. So you do throw out, as a writer, you throw out a lot of stuff, but you're always trying to retain something. You're filtering it, you're improving it. And so I would say, as a software developer, when I had a software business, you would try to improve it. You couldn't throw it out because it had to be backward compatible to the clients you're already supporting. And you didn't want to admit complete error, but you try to phrase things in terms of improvement. Also, the question was, where does spirituality fit in? And I just have to say, in many cases, it's got to be rephrased as being creative. And then in creativity, you can say, where's the beauty? And then if you've got the beauty, then you can say, where's the spirit? But if there's no creativity, I think you're 2 steps away from spirit and you can't reach it yet.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the profit first methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
Interesting. I find entrepreneurship to be very creative. And I find there are a lot of ideas, many of which need to be thrown out. Many fail, many work. Many times it's the wrong timing, or the market's not ready, or
Sure.
people are like, that's crazy. No one's going to turn their car into a taxi and pick up strange people, but here we are and they do. And so it's wild and crazy what will happen when you try different things, and you just never know what is going to work and what isn't. And yes, you will lose money, and sometimes you just got to burn it down and start over, but it all depends.
Well, it depends. I think this is important. What are your boundaries? How much can you afford to lose? How much risk can you afford to take? What is the kind of return you're looking for? And be reasonable, because you shouldn't, reach for the stars, because you're not going to reach the stars. You may reach, something great, but you're not going to the moon, hopefully, or Mars.
Elon is.
And the sooner the better, I feel.
So, and I think this is where, in the world of entrepreneurship, or just any kind of investing, you have an investing pot, and then you have a safety pot. And your safety pot makes sure that, you know what, I'm always fed, everything is okay, but I have this investing pot, and I can afford to take 20% of that and go into this deal, and I can afford to lose it all. If you look at people who are in the world of not private equity, but more so on the investment side, they run 10 deals knowing that 4 or 5 are going to fail completely.
Oh, I thought it was 9 out of 10, but okay.
Well, 4 or 5 might break even or do basic,
No.
and then 1 is going to blow it out of the water. That's their hope. So 1 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But still, those are the odds, and that's what they kind of do. And you never know what's going to happen and how it's going to come to be.
Oh, no, I won't let you stop there. You can't end a paragraph by saying you never know what's going to happen or how it's going to be. That's like floating off into the ether. You do have to have some idea about how it's going to end, even though you may be right that you never know correctly.
Well,
but it's the insane people who think they know and can't cope with any alternative.
Well, I think there's been many a business failure. They all hoped for the best, but they ended up with not. And I think where humans struggle sometimes is knowing when it's time to pull the plug.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This is not working. It's time to say goodbye to this idea. Actually, I think the bigger problem that people have in the world of business is their wild-eyed dreams. Instead of testing the market and finding things that people are already asking for, they try to build something that they think is the best thing since sliced bread, but nobody else may or may not have that problem. And even if they have that problem, they may not be willing to spend money to fix it. So that's kind of product market fit. I mean, how long did it take before the DVD came out? There were laser discs before that. I think there was some other technology before that. And so a lot of them failed until finally the DVD caught on. And now that is essentially gone. And so these things come and go, and they go through life cycles, and you see what happens. You try, you go, and where it goes, it goes.
Absolutely. When I was in the computer business, I made the mistake of investing in a small, highly effective integrated platform of software development, which technically was superior, but the market was dominated by the people who knew how to handle software, used older tools. So they were the IT managers, and they were the people who were trained on older tools. And so me, with my better tool, it reminds me, if you've done any carpentry, the development of the screw head, there's the Phillips head screw with just one slot, which really sucks because your screwdriver always slips out of it. And then they have various, hex screws and various star-shaped screws, and technically better, but now you have to have the coupling tool to use them. And, most homeowners don't have up-to-date tools, whereas most construction workers do. And so you see this sort of disjuncture between the better tool that most people don't have and the common tool that most people do have. And this is what I encountered in my business. I had the better tool, but most businesses had the common tool. Not only couldn't they use the better tool, but they didn't know how, because it required a different management structure, different sort of power to the construction workers. And so that business didn't work. And yeah, it was a sad lesson. I lost a fair amount of money, but I solved the technical problem. I did build the good tool in the platform that people didn't know how to use. But I'm not sure that's not necessarily a bad thing, because now I know about artificial intelligence, and I can say intelligent things about how people and businesses cope with change, which I might not have learned if I was just using the old tools and the old system that is now outdated and, the waterfall model of large corporate project management. So it's hard to know, which are the right paints to be using for the future canvas.
And that is very true. I'm sure you've done work with psychedelics
Yeah, lots of that.
and helping people. It seems to become very popular lately, especially in the entrepreneurial
Oh,
communities.
really? I'm
Yeah.
surprised because I don't have
But
I'm losing my enthusiasm for it personally,
interesting. Why is that?
because I think it's being marketed as a commodity and it's not well understood and it's not being responsibly. I think it's a very personal experience that's sort of being turned into sort of pornograph, made into like a pornography, something that, you do this and you get an immediate return, but you don't. It's a longer term project that unleashes a lot of work that needs to be considered seriously. And it's not just, buy a seat, take a pill, have a, theatrical experience, and then, walk out and judge it as if it was a movie. And so it's maybe popular in the entrepreneurial world. It's also popular in the psychotherapeutic world, but they're making it up as they go along too. My basic thing is I call this altered state work. It's hard to understand one altered state from the framework of another altered state. So, how do you understand romance from the point of view of business? Those two tend to get mucked up when they are combined. How do you understand politics from the framework of religion? Those don't seem to go very well together either. And how do you understand the irrational, which is often what you get from psychedelics, from the point of view of the rational, which is where most therapy comes from? And I don't think those two go together very well either, at least at present. So my background has been indigenous, basically. You go to the jungle and you work with shaman who have a technique for how to deal with confusion and chaos. And they don't call themselves doctors. Well, we call them doctors, witch doctors or some nonsense, but that's not what they call themselves. If you talk to a shaman about psychotherapy, they'll laugh at you. They'll say, what are you talking about? This is not our problem. We're not here to solve your childhood trauma. You do that through some other means that's, in connection with the defined spirits or whatever their cosmology talks about. So I've gotten kind of down on this commodity version of psychedelics. And instead, I basically say, this is real work. If you want to do this work, then embrace it. Then stop looking for, psycho porn, this one stop quick commodity purchase, and start realizing that you've got to start talking and thinking and feeling and engaging in your own chaos. And you don't need a psychedelic, frankly. You could do it through hypnosis. You could do it through dream work. You could do it through sensory deprivation. You could do it through extreme sports or whatever, fasting. And, the most extreme psychedelic experiences I've had were when I tried to climb into a cave for 3 days and, not come out. And by the end of those 3 days, it was just crazy. It was just insane. It did not wear off after 8 hours. And I just had to leave, exhausted, crawling out of these caves as a wreck, sometimes with a fever. And, you don't have to take it that far, but you didn't take any chemicals, just left to yourself with enough deprivation of sensation. Your mind starts to drift into some weird territory. And so that's the question. Are you really ready to deal with what's there, or do you just want it to wear off after 4 hours and then go home and talk to your friends?
To me, it opens a door. And once the door is open, you have to walk through it and you have to do a lot of work post it with integration, with whatever support systems you can have. But it's not like you mentioned, it's not go take something and be done with it. It's go take something to help you not have to be in a cave for 3 days and come out and see it. Maybe it's a way, not the way, a way to help you see parts of yourself. But then you do have to do all of the work afterwards. And I think that's the part most people don't do is the follow-up. Or they do a little bit of follow-up, but they don't really dig far enough or go far enough to change the underlying patterns or the underlying issues or examine them and question them and let go of them or whatever it is that particular person's journey.
Well, you get right down to it. It's like, who am I to criticize what you've decided to do? That's your next step. Go for it. My role, and maybe you feel your role, is mostly be a cheerleader. Like, I mean, my fundamental message to everyone is, I don't care what you do, just do something. Just don't sit on the fence anymore. If you want to sit on the fence, that's why I charge $200. You want to pay me $200 to sit on the fence? I won't even do that for a while. I'll feel like I'm robbing you. But that's the reason I charge money. Or one of the two reasons is to keep you motivated to do something. What's this worth to you? If you don't have a sense of value, then we're not going to get any value. So do something.
How do you tell when someone is truly ready to do the deeper inner work?
By challenging them, by saying, you should do this, or this is your homework, or consider that problem and take this action. So either they'll say, no, I won't, or I'll do something else, or they'll do it and they'll come back with some new information. And if they refuse to do anything in the past, I have engaged them. I think I'm going to stop. If you refuse to do anything, then I think I can't help you. Am I still going to try? I don't know. I feel like I have to deliver something for the money I charge. If I'm feeling that I'm going nowhere or you're going nowhere, I'll probably say, no. If you don't want to do the homework, we've gone on 2 or 3 weeks and come back to me when you're ready. And maybe that's where people need to go, Either that's going to the bottom or it's reaching the plateau or it's being satisfied with what they achieve. I don't know. Like, you can easily recognize they're dealing with a lot more complicated situations than they are going to tell me about and may even yet know themselves. It has to come out, right? These things grow, not like one plant, a garden. So how focused am I supposed to be in this whole thing?
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, how do you know?
I don't. That's why I asked.
Okay, right.
I find very few people take action, and I struggle with that. The fact that people won't take action.
Yes.
But I'm learning that's just what it is, and it's not my problem, and I can't control it. And so I have to let it go.
Well, this is my question to you and me as all. Where's the boundary between letting it go, which means letting it be, or your role in forcing it forward, or what you feel you've been called to do? Because you're called to do something, right? Some people calling you because they want you to help them to do something. And if you say, it's like being hitched to a wagon and then being told to pull forward and they have the brake on. At what point are you going to say, okay, forget it. I'm going to stop pulling because you're braking?
You throw some crumbs out or you throw a challenge out and you let go of it. And if they come forward, great. And if they don't, they don't. And that's where you let go.
Okay, that was my question. You let go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I let go. I wasted a lot of time trying to push people up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it anymore. You want to come? We'll go. But I'm not carrying you. I'll go with you, but I'm not going to pull you up the mountain. That's your choice. And I've realized that a lot of people just don't want to do what's best. And it's like, okay, don't. And I'll be honest, what I have noticed is the difference between let's just say success and no success, or a good outcome and a bad outcome, or whatever you want to call the two metrics, is usually very small. It's not a massive thing. It's a very small adjustment many times. Make some small adjustments and everything will go okay.
No,
But most people don't want to make small adjustments.
I want to make a comment. When it comes to people who are not that sane, what seems like a small adjustment to us could be a great adjustment to them. And I think it's pertinent. So, like, in my relationships, my two wife families, I've both felt that a small adjustment was all that was needed. But I had to recognize, or at least I've come to recognize, that that small adjustment, in my view, was actually a large adjustment for them. And I think that's sort of an explanation for why people seem to be stuck and unable to make what you call a small adjustment. And what I see also as small adjustment is that it's like, oh, just take your finger out of the dike. It's just a small adjustment. But the dike breaks when they do that. So they keep their finger in the dike. And that gets frustrating for us, both personally and professionally. And as you said, you get to a certain point, you disengage, which is fair enough. And the question that I'm left asking is, when I say goodbye to them, should I say, have a nice day? Or I should say, you're fucked up and you got to change. Goodbye. Probably neither make any difference. But I kind of wonder if I'm obliged to say one or the other.
Whatever the moment calls for. Sometimes one is better than the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten in trouble with both.
Yeah. See that?
Yeah.
And you know what? You didn't cause the trouble. So it is what it is.
Well, so the one of the last questions, or maybe the last questions, is like, how do you market this? How does one market this? We both got our billboard, our presentation, our elevator pitch. And it seems to me, it gets back to many of the questions you've asked. Does the elevator pitch or the presentation that we give to the people in the world around us rely on what we think we can do or what we hope to do versus what they want? So answer that.
The elevator pitch is around what you can do. Their response is whether or not they want that. So you're going to have a very different pitch than I am. And there's 100 other pitches out there. So people are going to listen to 100 and go, that's the one I want. And they may pick the wrong one. That's their choice. It's the world we live in.
I get the feeling that you're not a politician. What do you think about that?
I'm a bluntitician. I just say it bluntly. I'm like, hey, this is what I see. If I'm wrong, show me how I'm wrong and I'll change my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I see and this is what it is. And I'm not going to play these games with you. You want help? You don't want help? I'm out. I'm in, but I don't play politics. I really am very adverse to it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think it's a big problem, making promises and confusing people, or maybe they were confused already, but misleading people. Yeah, well, so I think part of my modus operandi is making myself obsolete with my clients. This is ambiguous. I want long-term clients, and I want to achieve most positive result most quickly, which results in short-term clients. So I guess I'm a mix. I appreciate the clients who find value, and I appreciate the ones who get what they need quickly. Go ahead.
After they fix that problem, I can assure you there's another one waiting. So you'll be good.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I also encounter people who are not ready to go on to the next problem after they've solved or addressed the first one, right?
They're just not ready, and
Right.
I get that.
Yes.
That is very, very true. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
That you're going to die and that you're going to be left with your legacy. And how do you want to affect people when you're gone or going? Because we're always in the process of going.
That we are. We are always in the process of going. Most people don't think about their legacy. I always say, begin with the end in mind. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
To communicate my feelings despite my lack of understanding them. In other words,
Hmm,
to work to develop an understanding, which is both what I understand communicated to them and pulling out what they understand from what they're disguising or trying to represent. I'm thinking about my two marriages. If I had asked more and demanded more answers, I would have had more useful information, which might have moved me ahead faster so that I had more time to make more mistakes and make more investments before I died or ran out of money.
very true. And I think learning how to communicate emotions and what you're feeling is a skill that is not also taught in school.
Absolutely.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
No, find mentors. That's easy.
There you go. Yeah, you also have to be willing to listen to them.
Well, but mentors often don't talk. They do. They're not about teaching, they're about doing.
Hmm,
So they join you rather than lead you. They have skin in the game.
hmm, interesting. If people would like to learn more about you, how do they do that?
They go to my overly large website at mindstrengthbalance.com and are free to get confused. Books and articles and blogs and therapy and sleep and dreams and coaching and business all mixed up. The two offers are you can always book a free call with me. A lot of us do that. And, there's just some pop up or there's some field where you click a button and you get put on the calendar. And I have a blog, which I publish for free monthly. And if you subscribe, you'll get my latest book in digital form for no charge, called Dreaming Yourself into Being,
Hmm.
which is my preferred approach to the psychedelic world. Dreams are harder, a lot harder to work with than psychedelics. They're not physically harder. They take more mental time and effort. They're very evanescent and fragile. So subscribe to the blog or have a free, consultation with me at mindstrengthbalance.com.
And we'll have all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ricky. Great, confusing, and now I'll probably have to take a nap.
There you go. Lincoln said something early in our conversation that I haven't stopped thinking about. He said he doesn't care about the quantity of money. He cares about the quality of value. That distinction is simple and it's devastating if you sit with it long enough. The question this episode leaves with is, what would change in your life if you stopped measuring and started noticing? Just be aware and present. If this conversation sparks something, pass it to someone who's been running hard and hasn't looked around in a while. That's really what Rich Your Soul's for. And if you want more of these kind of honest, unfiltered conversations, come find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.